Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Our government has all been shut down for the better part of a year here in D.C. You should see it. Total dysfunction. And all over allegations that Vladimir Putin somehow hacked our democracy on behalf of Donald Trump. Yet after all this time, the only actual crime that have surfaced during the course of this scandal appear to have been committed not by the president, but by his opponents, who have leaked reams of classified material in order to hurt him. That's a felony, by the way, and it's happened a lot, some weeks almost every day. The latest example comes from the National Security Agency, the NSA. A 25-year-old contractor with the name Reality Winner, supposedly her real name, is accused of leaking classified surveillance of Russian hackers. Now, the document suggests an effort to penetrate U.S. election software, though not to change vote totals. Not that details matter in this case. The whole thing just sounds sinister. And that, of course, was the point of the leak, to add the perception that Trump is somehow a foreign agent. Now, Reality Winner seems like the kind of person who might want to make that point. Take a look at her Twitter account. It contains an almost constant stream of attacks on the president she works for, or did until today. In February, she protested Trump's travel ban on Twitter by declaring that, quote, the most dangerous entry to this country was the orange fascist we let into the White House. She later tweeted that Kanye West, quote, you should make a shirt that says being white is terrorism. She retweeted Kurt Eichenwald, remember him? His tweet demanding a redo of the election and suggesting that Trump had KKK sympathies. Quote, why burn a flag Donald Trump thinks crosses burn much better? Now, this is obviously an intemperate political activist. How did she get a security clearance? We could ask the same question about a lot of people working in government right now, especially in our vast and unelected intelligence bureaucracy. Many of them hate the president. Now, that's happened before in other administrations. People just disagree with the new guy. And when that does happen, those with integrity resign their jobs and they speak their minds in public, maybe even run for office themselves. That's how a healthy democracy operates and has for a long time, but no longer. Unwilling to give up cushy government gigs in the name of principle, they have taken the cowardly route, one that's destroying not just the administration, but making the government impossible to run. Now, for the record, not all leaks are bad, even those that hurt politicians we might support or you might support. The public does have a right to know a lot more than it does. Trust us. But these specific leaks aren't designed to help, and they're not helping. They're not attempts by whistleblowers to alert the public to secret crimes. They haven't exposed a single illegal act. They're not about transparency. They are propaganda. They're selectively released to serve a political agenda, a specific one. The permanent political class in Washington hates the democratically elected president. That's what this is about, and it's making the country impossible to govern. Because even government officials need some level of privacy or they can't do their jobs. They can't think clearly. They can't speak honestly. They can't trust that their plans will remain veiled for a time, because they need to. Everybody knows this, and that's why normal people don't publish their emails online for everyone else to read, though at this rate, they may be published anyway, including yours. We're joined now by Brian Dean Wright. He's a former CIA officer, and Crystal Ball, a former congressional candidate and a senior fellow at the New Leaders Council. So, Brian, you worked over there, and it seems like a lot of these leaks are coming from government employees in the intel community, and they seem reckless. Is that perception right?
There's no doubt about that. Yeah, look, we have been warning about this, those of us who have served and are seeing these leaks over the past 6 months increase in volume and severity. The challenge that we face in the intel community is this. People believe that they are the judge, jury, and executioner of our political process. It's not all spies. In fact, it's the vast majority of folks. They're not doing this. They're doing their good work. But there are these people, and they need to be properly vetted. In this case, it just wasn't done.
You think? A 25-year-old political activist who almost immediately gets security clearances. Did anybody look at her social media accounts? Like, how could that happen?
Well, it sure should have. And if it didn't, and in this case, clearly it didn't, I guarantee you the security folks, to include the polygraphers, are going back over how in the heck she got through and why they didn't vet her information. I can guarantee you that's happening tonight.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. Easier in hindsight. Crystal, I'm not against all leaks. I benefited from many of them. I think the public has a right to know much more than it does. I mean that. Yeah. They hide too much from us, and it's our country. But these leaks are not designed to inform the public. They're designed to topple the administration, and they paint a picture that is not complete. It's selective, and I think it's misleading and inaccurate. What's the point of them other than to hurt the guy in charge?
Well, I don't think that's a fair characterization at all. I mean, there's been a concern for a long time, especially up until the point that Bob Mueller was appointed as special counsel. There was a concern that the investigation into Russian hacking in our election would be done in a partisan way and we wouldn't ultimately get to the truth. So if you look at this leak in particular with Reality Winner, this document, the classified NSA document that was released here, it doesn't actually have anything to do with Donald Trump. It has a lot to do with our elections and whether our elections are being tainted by Russians and if they're getting involved. And what it shows is that up through October, Russians were still messing with our election infrastructure. Look, there's an election in Virginia next week, so I think that it is reasonable for her to have made the judgment that it was in the public's best interest for this sort of information to be out there.
Well, that's insane. I mean, by the way, that's not actually what it demonstrates, that they were, quote, messing with our infrastructure. It means they, like every powerful foreign government in the world, wants to have more influence here than they do. It doesn't show they affected the outcome of anything.
No, it doesn't show that at all.
And
but it does show they were.
If she had concern about the integrity of our election infrastructure, why wouldn't she bring that to the people in charge of it within government? This is a purely political move.
Well, but there are election officials in every state and every county in the country. And so, look, I think she should be prosecuted. I think that it is important that we have information that stays secret in the government. But I also think that if somebody feels that it is worth risking jail time to put something out there in the public eye, then they have the right to do that.
So would you say that about, I don't know, an armed robber? If you think if it's worth risking getting shot during, a liquor store holdup, are you virtuous for doing it?
I mean, this is a very that's a very different situation, Tucker.
I don't think it is. So Brian, I'm sorry, you were going to jump in. Hold on. Let's give this man a say.
Sure.
All right. Here's the deal, Chris. We are both Democrats, but I got to tell you, I disagree with you on this, and this is why. In the intelligence community, if you have a problem with a piece of information being withheld and you know it's being done for wrong reasons, there are processes, and she had one, right? You go to the Inspector's General office, you go to the FBI's, various departments that they have that you can go to. We're trained on that. You go to the oversight committees. You go to your member of Congress or a member of Congress. There are systems in play that we in the intelligence community are taught to engage in dialogue on. She chose not to. She chose to go to the media to leak something based on her ideology, her goal, her political goal, and encouraging this. And it's happened, by the way, on both sides of the aisle. Washington Post, New York Times is encouraging it. Bill Kristol on the right. They're encouraging these spies to do this kind of stuff, to engage in their own version of, hey, it's my America and I can do with these secrets as I want. That is wrong. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat.
Chris, I want to ask you a specific philosophical question. That kind of is the point here. Who's in charge of the country? So voters, whether you like it or not, you don't, elected Donald Trump. That's how the system works. Voters are in charge. A small group of unelected people is saying we don't agree with that result, and we're trying to undo it. Which is more democratic? Which is more fair? Which is more in line with our traditions? I mean, it's not even close.
I just find it very interesting that we're more concerned about the leaks, which I already said I think she should be prosecuted. I think if other leakers are found, they should be prosecuted as well, just as the Obama administration did. But we are more concerned with the leaks than we are with the fact that the Russians attacked our democracy and that the president's campaign may have participated in it.
They didn't attack our democracy.
They did.
That's a meaningless phrase. Hey, hold on. And if you're interested in crimes and in exposing them to sunlight, and I am, the only crimes that we know about so far are the leaks themselves. So, this is innuendo. If they can find evidence that Trump was on the phone with Putin trying to move votes in Ohio, I will applaud the release of that information. But that's not what this is.
Tucker, it should not be a partisan issue to want to get to the bottom of what happened in our election and whether the president or his team had anything to do with that. I mean, that's fairly essential to our democracy.
Okay, so federal employees are now in charge of that investigation on a freelance basis. Don't we have an FBI? I mean, I kind of thought, Brian, isn't that kind of the whole point of having a Justice Department?
We have an FBI, and the director got fired for political reasons, Tucker. That's exactly what we're talking about here. That's why there's no faith in this investigation, because the president demanded a loyalty oath from Jim Comey and then fired him when he wouldn't give it, asked him not to investigate Michael Flynn. So, of course, people are saying
actually.
This
I know
is
you probably don't mean it because you're not thinking it through. Brian, the last word to you.
Tucker, two things. Two things. One, this is not an either or. We have to do both. Investigate the leaks, make sure the spies don't get into this regime that they think that this is appropriate. Second, let the FBI do the investigation. We are going to get the results as an American public, and we will decide then and there, do we take these results and do we punish President Trump? Or if he's not guilty and there's nothing there, then we go back to the ballot box in 2018 and 2020, and Democrats like me have to stand up and say, here's what we want to do for the country. Get over all this other stuff. It's ridiculous.
You don't have to support Trump to recognize what it looks like when the ruling class tries to undo the results of an election. That's exactly what's going on.
That's not what's happening.
It is. Crystal, Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
Europe saw yet another terror attack, sadly today, as a man with a hammer attacked a cop near Notre Dame, the cathedral in Paris, reportedly while screaming, "This is for Syria."
I was right at the door of the entrance, and we heard people rushing through the door, trying to get in, and the police behind them. And the police were just telling us, move to the front, move to the front. Of course, I don't speak French. I didn't know what they were saying, but I knew that they were serious.
I didn't expect that this happened here. Like, I was expecting that we went to the cathedral and everything was fine.
Well, mercifully, the only casualty today was the attacker himself, who was shot by an officer on the scene. President Trump says that these attacks show the need for his travel ban. But beside easy travel, what other factors have made Europe such a common terror target? Douglas Murray is the author of The Strange Death of Europe. He's thought a lot about this, and he joins us from London. Douglas, thanks a lot for coming on. One of the things you often hear Americans say, I have said, including last night, is that assimilation is the problem. These people are not assimilated. And yet you look around, and there are actually a number of groups in our society and yours who aren't assimilated. Hasidic Jews live apart. The Amish live apart. They pose no threat at all to the country they live in. They love the country. Why is this group different?
Well, that's the key question, the one that people in Europe, across my entire continent, that I'm sitting in, are thinking about and mulling about at the moment. The political response is to tweak bits of anti-terrorism legislation. The British Prime Minister tonight has announced that she will even perhaps take Britain out of some of the human rights jurisdictions that we're under. And this is the sort of thing that all the politicians do across Europe. Another terrorist attack occurs, and they have tweaks, effectively. But all the time, the public are wondering about these very deep problems underlying it, which include the one you just asked. What is it about people from these Muslim communities across Europe that mean that, you know, on an average Saturday night in London, just down the road from where I am, 3 young men of Pakistani, Moroccan, Libyan origin would end up stabbing repeatedly at young people while shouting, "This is for Allah." The truth is that it is obvious in one way. I mean, they are inspired by a version of Islam, a very violent and the worst possible version of Islam. But you know, our politicians are really stuck on this because they, through immigration rules they've had for decades, they brought this problem into Europe, and now they just seem to be totally unable to admit that or do any of the things that would solve it, because they gave us this problem.
And against all evidence, they lie about the motive. So if you want to know why someone's doing something, the first step is to ask him why you're doing this. I want to put up on the screen quotes from an Islamist magazine. These were printed directly after the Orlando nightclub attack here in the United States, and they say it really clearly. We hate you first and foremost because you are disbelievers. That's about as clear as it could possibly be. And then they go on to point 2, which is, we hate you because your secular liberal societies permit the very things Allah has prohibited while banning many of the things he has permitted. Your secular liberalism has led you to tolerate and even support gay rights, alcohol, drugs, fornication, gambling, and usury. They're widespread. You encourage people to mock those who denounce these filthy sins and vices. We could go on. But look, the point is, they're saying this is a religious war. Why don't we believe them?
Well, because if it is true, then we've got all sorts of miseries ahead of us. I happen to think we do. But, you know, in the meantime, we're in this transition phase in Europe. You know, I just came from a public debate I was doing in Westminster tonight, and, you know, the people are still, although things are moving, they are still in that sphere where it's, you know, they're saying, you know, what has our foreign policy done that might have caused this? Or, you know, if a guy comes from Pakistan, as one of the attackers from Saturday night did, I don't think much of our country's Pakistani foreign policy could be blamed on this. You know, people are sort of almost reaching out to find any reason other than the one that's staring them in the face. Because, as I say, again, there's this issue. It came up in Manchester 2 weeks ago. I mean, people try to say, what's our foreign policy problems that have caused this? Again, nothing that means you'd blow up 22 people at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester Arena on a Monday night.
That's exactly right.
But the person who did that, by the way, his parents came to this country from Libya. They got asylum, and then their kid, at the age of 22, blew up 22 people, one for each year of life that this country had given him. And those are the questions that our politicians are just totally incapable, for the time being, of addressing. And so we have this terrible and growing vacuum.
I want to go back quickly to something you just said, because I thought it was provocative. You said, if the obvious is true, if what they say about their own motives turns out to be true, it spells a tough time ahead. What does that mean exactly?
Well, let me give you a quick example. I mean, we all know that it's a tiny number of actual people from the Muslim communities who are going to carry out a terrorist attack. But 2 polls last year, one in April last year and one in December, by very reputable organisations, showed that in one poll, a half, and in the other 2/3 of British Muslims said they would not go to the police if somebody they knew was involved in ISIS-like groups. Now, the rest of us in Britain would go at the drop of a hat if somebody we knew of any background or orientation was involved in extremism. But that's what we're now facing. It's this question of, well, if they wouldn't even try to stop an attack like Saturday if they heard about them, where is the loyalty? What are they doing? What are they thinking? The truth is that a lot of those people, they want to defend the faith and protect their faith as they see it, more than they want to show, as it were, the loyalty that should be demanded by a nation of its subjects.
Douglas,
and as I say, we're still at the point where people don't want to demand that.
No, because it's too scary. I'm buying your book right after this. Douglas, thank you for joining us. That was really interesting.
Good to be with you.
Jared Kushner is the latest target of leaks by unnamed sources hoping to bring down the Trump administration. Britt Hume says the entire story is a joke. He'll be here to explain why. Also, celebrities coming to the defense of Kathy Griffin. Someone has to. We'll show you what they said just ahead. Hume tells us his story actually, to borrow a phrase from Hillary Clinton, may be a nothing burger. He joins us in the studio tonight. Britt, there's less here than meets the eye?
Well, some months ago, around February the 10th to be exact, the Washington Post published a story about Jared Kushner and his diplomatic undertakings, in which they discussed, particularly as regards Mexico, he had opened a channel to Mexico. A back channel, indeed, was discussed in the article, and they talked about how helpful he was being to the Trump administration, how he was known and trusted by a number of foreign leaders, and that he was kind of the foreign policy guy. In the story, it was all very favorable to Kushner. So later on we find out in this subsequent story that yes, indeed, the activities extended, although they never made mention of the earlier favorable story in the Washington Post, that he had discussed with the Russian ambassador, who is very much, it should be noted, a man about town who has consultations and conversations with officials at many levels, and the Washington ambassador in Washington, for the longest, as long as I can remember, has always been very much a well-known man about town that everybody saw, and he wasn't considered, and he is what he is. He's basically a diplomat. Now he may be also feeding everything he can back to Moscow. No one would doubt that for a moment, but he's never really been thought of as a major foreign agent, because he's right out there in the open.
Right.
So discussions with him would seem to me to be pretty much regular business. So there was apparently a conversation about the need to establish some kind of a back channel, which never came to pass. So basically what we're having here is a discussion with some surprise, a story acting surprised and perhaps shocked about something that Jared Kushner had been doing with other leaders, and which he didn't do with Russia. And that's the sum and substance of it. And you hear for John King, who's a good reporter, to say it's almost un-American, seems to me to be bizarre. Back channels have been used diplomatically going back forever. Go back to the days of Henry Kissinger and the setting up of the opening to China and all that. There are all kinds of back channel communications. It's not at all uncommon, and certainly not uncommon for White Houses, which sometimes want to work around the diplomats in the State Department. And who would mind that there were some channels that could be thought leak-proof in this environment?
Well, that's the un-American part of it, is that apparently Jared Kushner was so worried about our government's own intel agencies leaking the content of his conversation, he sought a separate means. Those intel agencies took that conversation, spied on them talking, and leaked the contents.
Well, so it turned apparently so.
But what I guess what bothers me is it's all implication. If you're going to leak something about somebody, tell us what the crime is. Tell us what they did. Be explicit. This is all, well, you met with this person. It's McCarthyite.
You know, Tucker, we may have discussed this before, but if you and I sat down and tried to design someone who would be absolutely detested by the nation's news media, we could not do better than Donald Trump. He's everything news media people don't like. He's rich, he's brash, he's inexperienced, he's, at least in terms of the agenda that he's adopted, he's pretty conservative. He's all of these things. And I think that, you know, the stuff that he does and says, particularly the things he says, make him a pretty target-rich environment. If reporters want to resist this man with honest reporting, they don't need to go into this kind of stuff. They just ought to report what he says and does.
It just seems to me the effects of this story in particular, which is why I'm so focused on it, are potentially much bigger than your average political story. Russia is a real country with a lot of nuclear weapons and a major player in a lot of world events. And so to distort our foreign policy in the service of a political aim like hurting Trump seems really reckless to me.
Well, look, it's certainly true that Russia's a nation we need to do a lot of business with.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And it would be nice if we could have improved relations with Russia. Vladimir Putin does not make that easy. And, you know, the Russians clearly attempted to meddle in the election. I suspect they've tried to meddle in many an election before this, and will try again. It's the kind of thing the Russians do. Whether it was decisive in any sense in this election is very much an open question, and the evidence of that is extremely thin, it seems to me. At the same time, I think, you know, you would not want it to be the case that we'd cooked up ahead of time a plan to go soft on Russia. You know, we might have, as if to say, we'll have more flexibility after the election. Wouldn't that have been a terrible thing to say? I can't imagine anybody about to take office.
Commentator and Black Lives Matter supporter. She joins us tonight. Lisa, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Good to see you again. You're doing well.
Thank you. I was confused by this because I thought the whole point of Black Lives Matter, one of the points would be to speak out against singling people out on the basis of their race and punishing them for that. Because you can't control what your race is, and yet they seem to be doing that. Explain that to me.
What I say to that is boo-hoo-hoo. You white people are angry because you couldn't use your white privilege card to get invited to the Black Lives Matters All Black Memorial Day celebration. Wow. Let me contextualize that for you. Memorial Day was created by... I don't want
you to contextualize.
Right? I need to contextualize it because Memorial Day was created by black former slaves in 1865 to honor those individuals who were Union soldiers who fought and died for our freedom. So Black Lives Matter, in that same vein, decided to get together with black folks.
I'm not going to let you filibuster past my question.
To make sure that black folks were celebrated for being murdered by racist terrorists.
I don't want to shut this down, but I will. Okay. I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. I just have a really simple question for you. If you don't like people excluding others on the basis of their race, and as a society we agree that that's bad. I agree it's bad, you agree it's bad. Then why are you doing it? And why are you defending it now?
White folks crack me up all of a sudden when we want to have one day for black folks to focus on ourselves. But you've been having White Day forever. You don't say the words anymore because you know it's politically incorrect. But you've had an all-white Oscars, all these movies with all-white actors, movie after movie after movie, all-white TV shows with white casts over and over and over again. The Bachelorette, it took 11 seasons of a black bachelorette. Are you serious?
It's hard to believe. I hope you're not speaking for anyone else. I hope there aren't a lot of people in this country who agree with you.
Well, my name is Lisa Durden. I'm speaking for Lisa Durden.
I just hope there aren't people watching who agree with you, because what you're saying is so hostile and separatist and crazy. It's such a basic violation of what I thought we all agreed on, which is you don't attack people for things they can't control, namely their race.
It's not an attack. I'm stating the facts. People give weddings where they exclude children. It doesn't mean they don't like children. They don't know if your kids are going to be monsters and those kids are going to be well behaved. So in that same vein, Black Lives Matter decided to have one day where they didn't want white folks who are going to be off the rails. They don't know if you're going to be the ones behaved and for them or the ones who are there against them. So they pick one day to do the celebration.
Let me just ask you a quick question.
Go right ahead.
Do you think it's racist to exclude people on the basis of their skin color?
I think it's racist when you've been excluding people for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Why don't you answer my question and
stop with your silly lectures? I'm asking you a very simple question.
We're forced to come together collectively to celebrate ourselves because you guys won't. You are the larger society. Let's be real here.
You guys, I'm talking about what I thought we all believed. Let me ask you this. Do you think it would be fair if white people did come to a Black Lives Matter celebration?
They do all the time. When you look at Black Lives Matter,
do you use the same water fountain that they do?
And you see Black Lives Matter coming together collectively for different issues. You see people of all races. So we do accept them. This particular day, they said, stay your asses out. We want to celebrate today. We don't want anybody going against us today.
And you can't celebrate if someone who doesn't look like you is around?
Yes, you can, but you can also say, I don't want to do it. It's a personal choice.
You're sick, and what you're saying is disgusting, and if you were a Nazi, I would say the same thing to you.
Luckily, I'm not a Nazi.
Because what you're saying is indistinguishable from what they are saying, which is, I don't care your opinions, I don't care your views, your life experience, your intentions. All I care about is the way you look, something that you can't control. And on that basis alone, I'm judging you, and I'm hostile to you. That's the case you're making, and it's divisive and wrong. And it's amazing that you didn't have to say that out loud, but I can't believe you're making the case you're making.
Unfortunately, when you have a racist society like America, you force individuals to come together collectively to make sure that they have a voice. And that's unfortunate that the racism has caused people to come together collectively.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a single white person in America you would have let into this?
Now,
into the celebration.
I'm not Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a movement.
You're just an apologist for this.
However, I can respect the decision. It doesn't mean it's the decision I would have made. Maybe I would have. Just like a wedding where I might say your kids can't bring their badasses in my wedding.
Children are not an ethnic group. Every person in the world, it does matter. You're discriminating against people with kids.
You're saying don't bring your badass kids.
Would it be okay? Yeah, but you see,
and that's okay.
Okay, but there are white adults and Asian adults and Hispanic adults. And presumably they're basically the same as black adults, but you don't agree with that.
We have gay pride parades. We have Puerto Rican Day parades. We have all kinds of parades and days that honor individuals. We have Mother's Day. We have Father's Day.
Fathers are allowed to participate in that.
Just take your mama out,
I'm not sure you're even capable of having this conversation, so I'm going to end it now. Let me ask you one last. Let me ask you one last question, and be totally honest with this. He became AG, and he has drafted new legislation in the short time he's been here that would fund a wall on the Mexican border and would pay for it by diverting any federal transportation dollars currently going to sanctuary cities. Senator Strange joins us now to explain his plan. Senator, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
So how's this work?
Well, it's all about the rule of law, building the wall, of course, which was the president's #1 promise, and also respecting, making our cities safer. So how it works, in a nutshell, is we identify sanctuary cities. Those are cities loosely defined that don't follow the law. They do not cooperate with police. They don't turn people in. And they also are now, it turns out, working with preventing their citizens from actually even bidding on the wall construction. So if you want to bid on the wall to construct the wall, and we have a law that says we're going to build a wall, we're taking bids to build it, they come in and say, if you do that, citizen, you're going to be banned from doing any work in the city of San Francisco, just for example. Exactly. So our simple solution is, if you're not going to comply with the law, we are a nation based on the rule of law, then we're going to use that money to build the wall. You just won't get it.
That's a lot. I mean, transportation funding for a state like California is enormous, federal funding. So, do you think that the Senate would actually back something like that?
Well, the senators I've talked to, and I have support from my colleagues from Georgia, Wisconsin, we're building support for it, is that they can't believe in the United States this is actually going on. We're a nation of laws, Tucker, as you well know. And here we have cities saying, look, we just don't agree with the wall, so we're not only going to express our First Amendment rights, we're actually going to penalize citizens who are just trying to make a living. There are bids out to build the wall. I live in San Francisco. I bid, my company bids to pave a parking lot along the wall, do something that contributes to that. I'm going to be paid by the federal government under the Secure Fences Law, a law that was passed in 2006 with the support, if you can believe it, of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and others, a common sense solution. We don't agree with that policy. We're not going to enforce the law. And I just don't think it makes any sense for United States taxpayers to turn around and give those jurisdictions money when they're refusing to cooperate and actually going forward and punishing their own citizens for trying to make a living, frankly, but also build a wall which the American people want and need.
and which they voted for, the representatives did. So here's what I don't understand. We've had 2 times in American history mass resistance to federal law. Once wound up with the Civil War, the other wound up with tanks in various cities around the South, the Civil Rights Movement. Right. You're seeing something similar brewing right now, where elected officials, I'm ignoring federal law. Right. Where does this wind up? Where is this going?
Well, that's the crux of the matter. Where does it end? And we already know in immigration law, that's one of the things we can all agree on that's a federal responsibility.
Yes.
The federal government decides what our immigration policy is, what our naturalization policy is. We don't have every city, town, village, and state determining what the qualifications are to live here, what our borders are going to look like. That is a national debate that we're having. So it really goes back, Tucker, to the rule of law. Are we going to be a nation of laws or not? And it's not only a principled matter, it's a matter of public safety. The people that are crossing the border and people are ignoring the wall and ignoring building it are making their cities less safe.
But what about your colleagues in the Senate or across the way in the House? They're elected officials. You think they would stand up for federal prerogatives and the rule of law, and they're not.
And they're not. It's hard to believe. Part of it is a continuation of the war on Trump, if I can use that term. He won. He's done something extraordinary. He said, I'm going to actually fulfill the promise that I made. There's an existing law, a secure border law. We're going to fund it. We're going to build the wall. We're not only going to do that, we're going to, thanks to the great work of Jeff Sessions, we're going to enforce our laws.
Yeah.
What if just a simple solution to the immigration problem, for starters, is to enforce the existing laws on the books? They've said they're going to do that. That sounds like a novel thought.
No, it does.
And you know what's happened? Because they've just said that, and they're actually doing it, but they've made it clear, and that message doesn't just go to the border, it goes south of the border. It goes all throughout Central America. We're going to enforce the laws on the books in the United States. Illegal border crossings are down almost 40% in this country just since.
I'm kidding.